Now, I don't usually go much for the Roberts radios. I've nothing really against them. My modern daily driver radio is a Roberts radio, although, you know, obviously the company doesn't have much in common with the company of old nowadays. This one caught my eye, though, because of the unusual layout. You can see it doesn't have a normal tuning scale. It's all presets. So you have these 6 presets here. You have 2 for long wave and 4 for FM, and you set them up with these little tweakers here as to what you want the stations to be, and then having done that, you just select them with these buttons here. So let's just have a go at that.
And they're working hard to remove the cameras as a matter of priority. A paedophile from Wisbech who was found with nearly 3,000 indecent images.
While a South Cambridgeshire oven cleaner says he stopped working to help key workers get the fuel they need.
The 6-year-old man's been in court charged with the murder of Sabina Nessa in southeast London. The 28.
So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You set these things up. You lift this little flap up to do that. So there's a little flap here, and you can then get at these things. And that's, you know, putting that on protects you from tweaking them while it's in use and messing it up. I think, well, I know, looking at the manual, there used to be a little tool here to make it easier to tweak them, but that's disappeared. And then you've got your usual tone and volume controls. And then this AFC thing, the automatic frequency control, is supposed to keep it on station. I don't think that's working very well, because I tuned these in and I spent an entire day listening to Radio 3 and on one of the presets, and it just kept drifting off. After about an hour or so, it would just move off tune, and I had to keep readjusting it. So maybe we do have to have a look at that. Other than that, the sound is pretty good. It's not in bad nick, really. It's, you know, there's the usual little scuffs and things, which should clean up quite easily. You might be fooled a bit as to how old this radio is. It comes from the 1990s. 1993 is when it was manufactured. But they had earlier versions that looked a bit like it and later versions that looked a bit like it. As far as I can tell, they made things that looked rather like this up until the early 2000s. So it's quite modern circuitry, really. It's all integrated. Well, it's not all, but it's got integrated circuits in it, which it definitely marks it out as being newer. You might also be wondering about this, how these tuning things work, because you can't imagine you'd have like 6 of those big vane tuning capacitors in it, and in fact you don't. What you actually have is what we call either a varicap or a varactor, which is a reverse bias diode working as a capacitor, and you vary the capacitance by varying the voltage on it. So here's some examples of it here in the circuit. You see, then it's drawn like this as a diode with a capacitor at the end. The voltage you put on it is therefore just going through an ordinary, like these 100k pots here. You don't need to have a capacitor. You know, you just little potentiometers are fine, but you then have to make sure you've got a pretty stable voltage coming into here, because if it somehow increases or decreases, then you're going to go off tune, and I wonder if that's what's happening. There is a 5-volt regulator in it. It runs off 6 batteries, the usual 6 C-cell batteries, which it comes up to 9 volts. And then there's a 5-volt regulator off that, which is driving the power rail for those varicaps. So I would have thought the 5-volt regulator would be taking care of that, but I suppose what I need to do is get it apart and put a monitor on it, put a meter on it, and see if the voltage drifts off after a while. I'm not sure why that would be happening. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a bit of a clean-up job, I think. And but getting it apart is probably likely to be a challenge. Okay, so to get this apart, first of all, we'll get the batteries out the bottom. The usual explosion as they come out. We'll try to avoid that. And then there's this sort of captive screw thing here. Well, there's some captive screw. It's not really a captive screw, but it's only sort of levers as you look at it, as you undo this screw from the back here, just one screw holds this whole battery box in. And then the battery box just levers out like that, still wired up, which is a bit of a pain. There isn't a way to disconnect. Oh well, there we go. So we know how to disconnect it quite easily because it's just come off. In fact, I think what I'll do is, while we're at it, I'll just remove that one anyway, because we're going to have to wire it up again. So let's just get rid of that, and then the battery box isn't in the way. So then when you look at it, you can see clearly, so you can see the nice wooden, real wood cabinet here, not any of this fake wood stuff, and sort of rather amateurish looking wooden mountings or things for the PCB to go in. All looks fairly new and clean inside, but how do we get it out? The secret with these radios is, because you can't see any other screws holding it in, and the secret with these radios is the handle. The handle actually has, so if you push it in exactly the right place, you can sort of get it to drop down, and then yeah, it will just lift off at the sides, like I've done it on that one. Yeah, there we go, just lifts off. You can see there's like a you can't see it. Yes, you can see it. There's sort of like a two-stage thing here that it just slots onto. I think this is actually a little bit slack. I don't know whether there used to be a sort of rubber washer in there to make it tighter or something, but it does feel a bit slack now. Anyway, that's got the handle off. So the next thing is, having taken the handle off, you've got a couple of screws here which were holding the handle on. So the idea is to take those screws out. And what should happen then is that the radio should just push out from either the back or the... not having a lot of success here. Should just lift up. I don't want to pull it with this thing because I don't want to break that. Is it something that you have to lever it? So let's try that. I think I'll pull that away as well now. It does feel as if it might lift up a bit there. Coming up. It's been very reluctant if it is coming up. I think somehow we're going to have to lever off these front and back, sort of take off these front and back leatherette panels here. I think that's going to have to be done, which is disappointing, because we're going to have to glue them back at some stage. I don't know whether anybody's put extra glue on, that's why it's not pulling out, but I think. So here, no, it's got sort of a... I'm not sure that was supposed to come out like that. I think it's... So, if I take that off, this pad's going to have to get fixed. Yeah, I can see it beginning to pull out now, so I think I've got to do something with the back end as well, which is a bit more challenging. Yeah, sorry, I just had to remove the cat there. It was making like a lot of noise and disrupting the recording. Well, he may have had more idea of how to get this apart than I have. Yeah, one of the things I don't like about these Roberts radios is the fact that they're not really designed to be easily maintainable in a lot of cases. I think the engineers that built them had very little regard for the maintenance engineer, and that's obviously a long-standing gripe of mine. Because really, you shouldn't have to do this sort of stuff to get the thing apart. And if they're assuming that, you know, you never have to get it apart because it's so good, well, they had a very rosy idea of British technology of the 1990s, in my view. Here we go. So now, yep, it lifts out. The aerial doesn't keep it in. Well, I say it lifts out. It hasn't lifted out, has it? Something's sticking with it. Yeah. I spoke too soon about the aerial, didn't I? The aerial itself doesn't hold it in, but that little bit of wire on here that you won't see that. Yeah, this little bit of wire to here that is screwed onto the end of the aerial, that is what's holding it in. So yet another screwdriver is required in order to remove that. That's the wrong screwdriver. Does that look like a number one? This is a number one. Just make sure we don't lose the little washer from that. What should happen is that aerial should just pull out now. Yeah, so there's the aerial and the screw and the washer. So now, yay, it almost comes out. What's sticking it now? Probably the speaker wires, I guess, yeah, and the wires to the switch. Speaker wires would just pull off, but you can probably, well, can you see enough of it to work on it now? I'm not convinced. I think I'd probably want to lengthen some of these wires in order to do that. So that's it dismantled. Next stage will be to start looking at the actual circuitry and trying to do a few measurements to see whether we can find out how to deal with this drift.